and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the arse of the subscription button as well, and remember to tap that notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. I would like to reach out and say a huge thank you to those of you who have supported Cryptids Roosts financially. We pray the good Lord replenishes you abundantly, and to those of you who will later on. We pray the good Lord bless you as you do so. And also a huge thank you to everyone for always supporting the channel with your likes, comments and shares as well. It is all very much appreciated. God bless you all. We are fast approaching 500 subscribers. To celebrate this milestone, we will be running a competition when we hit it. The competition will be open to everyone. Details on this will be available closer to the time. I would like to offer a big welcome to Dr. Celtic 1 to the British creepypasta narrator family. I will link his channel below. Why not pop over and check out his new channel? So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. I'm a monk at a northern monastery. We observed the end of the world. This awesome story is written by Suspicious Nail 949, a wonderful author over on Reddit, and was written especially for me. If you'd like to read more of their works, the Reddit link to their profile will be below in the description. November 18th, 2004. Well, I suppose I should get this down somewhere. I know I'm going to sound crazy, but if you find this, please don't destroy it or cast it away as the ramblings of a madman, for I believe something contained within this message could prove to be invaluable in the right hands, although I'm not quite sure as exactly which part. My name is Marthan Allenson, and I am a monk of the Bocathian Monastery at Baffin Island, or rather I was, but we'll get to that later. It's very remote. There are 2 towns within a 50-mile circle around it, and nothing can be accessed on foot, barring one dangerous emergency trail, and there's a very good reason for it. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard all about Bocathianism, what with those who think we're deranged cultists, or those who think we're in cahoots with the governments of the world. But if you haven't, I'll explain. Bocathianism was founded by China Bocath, an Inuit woman who lived from 1104 to 1176. We believe that she came across a spirit while wandering what would become the Canadian wilderness of Somerset Island, and that spirit led her to a sacred pool. Within said pool were waters that allowed observers glimpses into the knowledge of the universe, should said observer be completely submerged within. Jaina was made privy to the creation of our universe, and upon seeing it, inscribed it on the walls of the cave. She realised that, while the knowledge she received was harmless, and in fact beneficial, not all of the information the pools gave out would be the same. Before disappearing, the spirit told her that the pool was far from unique, and that there were 7 more, all at the same latitude. Of course, that information wasn't confirmed for several hundred years, but throughout her lifetime she was able to find 2 more. Today, not much progress has been made, as just 1 has been found in the 8 centuries since Jaina's lifetime. At each pool there is a Bocathian monastery. We are the guardians of the pools. We are the keepers of their knowledge, and we take our task very seriously. None but the highest order of monks are allowed to view the knowledge of the universe, and those monks are the ones who know the risks and the power of the knowledge. And it is with those monks, myself among them, that this strange story begins. 2 weeks ago, the head monk, Andre Bilak, called myself and Lucho Noboa, another monk, into his personal quarters without giving the messenger who told us a reason. When we first arrived at his humble room, he told us to have a seat, then began.
"I have been having dark premonitions as of late," he said, "and my dreams, they have spoken of evil times to come. I foresee trials and tribulations in the near future."
"For whom?" Lucio asked.
"For all of humanity, should several individuals not rise to the occasion," Andre replied. "I believe the time has come to visit the pool."
The feeling in the room immediately turned cold. Dark premonitions are far from uncommon, though they usually precede things like natural disasters or a revelation of corruption in some major world government. For Andre to believe that the situation could be so dire that it required a glimpse into the knowledge of the universe, this would have to be an event on a scale that makes the previous ones seem trivial. I glanced over to Lucio to see that we both understood the gravity of the situation, though that is a confusing way of putting it. "How soon do you require this knowledge?"
"I must take the necessary time to cleanse my mind and soul, but beyond that, as soon as possible,"
Andre said gravely. "And what will we do if we discover that the end is preventable? Who would we contact? We haven't allowed an outsider access to the sacred knowledge as long as I've been here," I reminded him.
"I'm not sure, but the information must be known," he returned. "It must only be one, and they will spread the message. Go now. I will be at the pool in 2 hours. Be ready to aid me."
Lucio and I immediately stood, nodding affirmatively, and left the room. We went straight to the pool, and we didn't speak until Andre arrived, precisely 2 hours later. As monks, we have plenty of experience with silence, and we didn't want to be overheard by an unwanted ear. He greeted us with a nod and then began to strip off his clothes. There was no small talk or explanations. Both would be unnecessary and disruptive to the atmosphere of the cavern. Then, without a word, he stepped into the crystal clear waters and lowered himself in. Lucio and I watched intently, his face perfectly still for a few moments beneath the water, as he instantly entered a meditative trance. However, after those moments his eyes flew open, but they weren't normal. They were completely black, and as they opened, he also opened his mouth, letting out a vicious scream that was transformed into mere bubbles beneath the water. We waited, knowing that extreme reactions were a natural part of entering sea and pools, even standing by as he began to convulse violently. The ordeal only lasted for about a minute, at which point all motions and sounds ceased, and he slumped back to the bottom of the pool. Lucio and I quickly reached in and pulled him out at that point, and he sat up, gasping for breath as the water dripped off of him. We allowed him a moment to catch his breath, and before we could even ask him anything, he panted, It's coming." Then he promptly fainted. He remained unconscious for another 5 minutes, during which time we took him back to his personal quarters so we could discuss his vision away from the waters of the sea and pool. He slowly came to after about 5 minutes, blinking to clear his vision. Several more convulsions coursed through his body before he fully regained consciousness, and when he did so, the look in his eyes was terrifying. "Call someone, anyone," he said. While in the pool, as he explained to us, he had seen visions of a creature old as time itself, a creature powerful enough to torture the entirety of humanity and feed off of our suffering. As he explained, we helped him to the monastery's library, where he began searching through the books. "The creature," he said, looking across the many titles in our collection, "it wasn't ready. It hadn't been awakened yet, or something of the sort.
but it's coming, and when it is awakened, we will need to be prepared.
As in the monastery? I asked. He turned around.
No, as in humanity.
Then he resumed rifling through the books.
This creature, it is made of pure darkness. It emanates evil. In fact, it feeds off of good. That is why it affects humans so, as even in the worst of us, there is always some light.
It feeds off of good? I repeated.
Yes, or to be more precise, the suffering of benevolent souls,
he repeated. Then he selected a novel and pulled back on it. The entire bookcase shifted, revealing a passageway behind him.
Come, we must search the deep archives for further information.
I hadn't even known that the deep archives existed prior to that moment, and after climbing down a spiral staircase, I was amazed at the extent of the knowledge the monastery possessed. There were hundreds of volumes in this hidden library, all regarding information that the public had no idea of. There were outside books. Ones that stuck out to me were The War Within World War II by Layla Bradshaw and Hot Zones by Amsula Adamu, the latter seeming to be more of a leather-bound journal than a published manuscript. There was also a long series of publications called Sea and Pool Knowledge, the most recent one being written by Andre himself, the others apparently by the other head monks in the monastery's history. However, Andre bypassed all of those, instead making for a podium at the end of the long library, which held one book, an incredibly thick one at that. It couldn't have been less than 1,000 pages long, and was most likely longer. He quickly flicked through it, seemingly knowing precisely where he was going, and then stopped at a page.
Ah yes, the Udo,
he exclaimed, beckoning us over. Reading from the book, he said,
Udo, a pure darkness, feed off of human suffering. Ah yes, Udo are in a state of sleep for most of their lives. During this time they are able to move, but only towards a bright soul, like the moth to a lamp. Udo require the consumption of a varying number of bright souls to be awakened, the exact number of which changing creature to creature, and once an Udo is awakened, it will expand in a non-destructive manner, enveloping all within its murky self, torturing it for all eternity.
Wait, what is a bright soul? I asked.
One who displays things like extreme acts of bravery or heroism, Andre replied. They are more potent nourishment for Udo, and they provide sufficient energy to begin the feeding process.
So, Udo is coming to Earth? Do they live in space? I asked.
No, I saw this creature in a house of some sort, Andre replied, furrowing his brow. I'm not sure where it was, but it was certainly disguised. No one can see it, and it's not emitting enough energy to appear on any scanners, as it's still asleep.
If it's sleeping, we won't need to worry about it, right? Who in their right mind would awaken it? I pointed out. Andre shook his head, a dark expression coming over his face.
That brings me to my next vision. The keepers of the Udo. They are evil, despicable group of people, led by a man who puts all others to shame. I saw much darkness within many of them, but the leader, he is truly, in every sense of the word, evil.
Why would a group of humans seek to unleash something that tortures humans? Lucio asked, and Andre simply shrugged.
I have no way of knowing their motivations. I know naught but what I've told you, he replied. But this is indeed serious. We must contact someone about it, to warn them.
Who are we supposed to warn about it? I asked. There isn't exactly a hotline to report potentially world-ending events. I think I may know, Lucio answered reluctantly.
There was a woman before I became a monk, he sighed. Her name was Alfie Grant, and we were lovers for several years. It was a good relationship, although it didn't end on the best of terms. I fail to see the importance, Andre said as his brow furrowed. I wasn't finished, Lucio replied. She always was rather strange, or perhaps reserved is a better word for it, and it wasn't until the end of our relationship that I found out why. She'd never told me what she did for a living, and one night she was out extraordinarily late, which wasn't uncommon, but usually she'd tell me when it was going to happen. That night she didn't, so I decided to go looking for her at the office I usually found her at. She wasn't there, and the people working there weren't exactly being helpful, so I started looking for her. Long story short, I ended up finding her, and her job was far more deserving of the secrecy with which she treated it than I could have ever guessed. Alfie worked for an agency that protected the world against supernatural threats, aptly named the Supernatural Protection Agency. It's obviously secret, and people who find out about it generally get into quite a bit of trouble. But by all rights, I should have too. Alfie was furious with me, but for some reason she pulled some strings and got me off. We haven't spoken since, but I could get in contact with her. This Supernatural Protection Agency, Andre said. What is it they do? Do they have the authority or power to combat this threat? I don't know, Lucio replied, but it's the closest thing we've got. With the fate of humanity at stake, they'll have to do. All right then, he nodded. Make the call. Out of principle, we have very little communication with the outside world. It doesn't do well to have tourists streaming in and out of a pool containing the knowledge of the universe, so we generally keep it to ourselves. Our nearest contact with human society is nearly a 10-mile hike away, through freezing tundra and rocky hills. But a path had been prepared long ago in the event that such a thing would occur. Lucio and I made the journey, arriving before nightfall that very day. After speaking with the natives in incredibly rusty Ojibwe, a language we all learned for just this event, they brought us to the only telephone in the village, inside a small glass booth just big enough for one person. Lucio stepped in and I waited outside while he called Alfie. It was a quick call, especially given the subject matter, and after only a few minutes he stepped out. She's on her way, he told me, pursing his lips. I told her I couldn't explain it over the phone, but that it was a threat to humanity and directly involved her work. And she agreed to come? I asked curiously. Not many people have that number, he replied, running his hand through his hair. Her partner and the leader of the division are getting on a plane for here as soon as possible. It was about 4 hours until they arrived, which isn't terrible considering how remote we are, but it's not easy to pass 4 hours in a small unnamed village in northern Canada. The impending threat of humanity's doom did help though, and soon enough we heard the faint buzz of an engine off in the distance. It grew in intensity, and within minutes it had grown to a deafening roar, and then it settled as the plane landed. Once the noise ceased, we approached the makeshift runway, and within moments a hatch on the side swung open, and 2 sharply dressed agents stepped out of the small propeller plane, followed not too long after by what I could only assume was the leader of their division, a man dressed in more fancy but less practical clothes. Lucio waved at them as they walked towards us, his face set without emotion, and Alfie's partner was the one to break the ice. I take it you're the monks we spoke with on the phone? She asked. Yes, I'm Martha Allenson. I introduced myself, extending a hand to shake. Courtney Reynolds, she replied curtly, not taking my hand.
Have you told anyone what Andre saw since we spoke? No, I told her. Good, let's go somewhere more private, she said. We didn't speak on the way back to town, the agents and their superior keeping a brisk pace that shortened the walk. When we reached town, I heard the plane's engine begin to whir, and when I turned to investigate, I saw the pilot circling around, preparing for a takeoff. I tilted my head at the decision, but the looks on the faces of Courtney and Alfie told me it was best not to ask. We made our way into the small hut where Lucio and I had waited, and once we'd all entered, Courtney shut the door behind us. All right, let's get down to it. Who the hell are you, and what makes you think you can see the future? I paused for a moment, taken aback, and Courtney pounced. I asked a question. Why are we here? If you're just some conspiracy nut, you can get into a lot of trouble for wasting our time. I assure you, Agent, we are entirely sane, I told her, holding my hands up. We are monks at a monastery just north of here, and we have access to knowledge of the future. Do not threaten us or attempt to scare us to gain something more out of this exchange. We know by the mere fact that you are here that you believe us. It was the agent's turn to be surprised at that. Reynolds, lay off him. Their commander stepped in, then turned to me. Can you take us to this area where you can see the future? I'm afraid that's not up to us, Lucio told him. We can bring you to our monastery and you can make the request to the head monk, but it isn't very likely. It has been a very long time since an outsider has been permitted in the seeing pool. All right, that works, the man replied. Then he extended a hand. I'm Dylan Cole, by the way. I'm the recon director at the SPA. I nodded. We will bring you to the monastery in the morning. It is not safe to make the journey tonight. That's not an issue. We'll take the plane, Cole stepped in. This matter is, as you probably know, pretty urgent. I nodded my head. Very well. The flight to the monastery was very quick, and there wasn't much conversation on the way over. After landing at a flat strip just outside of the main building, we exited the plane and were nearly immediately greeted by Andre himself.
Hello, agents. It is an honour to have you here,
he said, bowing deeply. Thank you, brother, Cole said. He held up a hand.
Please, Andre is fine. Come now, I'm sure time is of the essence.
As we walked through the cold halls of the monastery, Andre gave the agents a brief explanation of both Bocantianism and the seeing pools. So, let me get this straight, Courtney said when he'd finished the initial explanation. You guys just happened to find this pool that lets you, see the future when you go in it? And now you're keeping it from the rest of the world for a millennium?
Not just the future, Agent, Andre corrected. A glimpse into the knowledge of the universe that sometimes includes the future, but it is not restricted to it.
We're going to need some proof, Courtney told him.
I'm afraid that may be difficult, Andre replied. None outside of the keepers have entered the pool's depths since Chaina herself did so.
Listen, I'm not as hesitant to believe you as Agent Reynolds, but even I have to say, you're asking a lot of us.
Cole stepped in.
Our reputations are at stake here.
The fate of humanity is at stake,
Andre reminded them.
We really don't know what this claim is that you are making, Cole said. It may be helpful if you could give some information further than the end of the world.
I saw a creature of darkness in our future,
Andre replied.
A creature that feeds off of human suffering. That is so immensely powerful. Should it be awakened, it is highly unlikely that we would be able to stop it.
All right, Cole said. Very specific. Anyway, if there were such a creature, why couldn't we just not awaken it? Why would anyone do that?
For the rest of the walkover, they went through the same questions we had, Andre answering them deftly. Then we finally arrived at the entrance to the seeing pool.
We are here,
Andre announced, nodding at the door. All right, are you going to let us in? Courtney asked, getting even more impatient than she'd been when she first arrived.
I suppose,
Andre began, biting his lip and thinking.
There can't be much harm. You may look, but there isn't that much to see.
Excellent,
Cole nodded, smiling. He turned to Courtney and Alfie and said,
You two, go on. I'll be just a minute. I have to make a call.
They nodded, and Andre extended his hand, welcoming them into the Sea and Pools room. The crystal blue waters reflected on the faces of the agents, and the calming aura of the room instantly affected both of them. It was strange, the surreal sensations emanating from the pool combined with the inquisitive, calculating nature of the outsiders, and they felt it too. They were speechless for a moment. Then Courtney cleared her throat and said, So, walk me through what would happen to incite one of these visions. The waters do the work, I told her. All that is required of the observer is to enter, although generally speaking we remove our clothes, but that is just out of comfort. Of course, Courtney said, staring deeply into the pool. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask them, but otherwise take your time. Whenever you feel ready, you may leave.
Yeah, that might not happen, if I'm going to be honest with you,
Cole said from behind us. I hadn't heard him come in. Excuse me? I said, turning around.
This is too valuable a resource to allow to slip out of our grasp, he replied. I'm afraid that on behalf of the SPA, I'm going to have to claim this monastery and all that is within it.
You can't do that,
Andre exclaimed, stepping forwards.
It is the right thing to do, Andre,
Cole said, holding out a cautioning hand.
With the powers of this pool, can't you imagine how much good we could do? You just can't keep it to yourselves. This can benefit all of humanity.
The power has corrupted you,
Andre told him.
Think clearly.
What are you talking about?
Cole asked.
You are delusional if you think keeping all of this knowledge to yourself is better than using it to help people.
You're delusional if you think making it public will cause people to be helped,
Andre retorted, walking up to him.
Andre, you have to calm down,
Cole told him as Lucio and I watched with bated breath.
I have authority here. What I say goes.
You do not understand what you are doing.
No, you don't understand what you are doing,
Cole snapped.
The decision has been made. If you continue to resist, we will resort to force.
I swore to protect this pool, and I have been trained in the event that I need to uphold that oath,
Andre told Cole, lowering his stance and preparing for a fight.
Stand down,
Cole snapped.
We don't want to hurt you.
You leave me no choice,
Andre told him, and with lightning speed he punched him across the mouth, causing it to emit a spray of blood. Bang! 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 3 shots. We hadn't even seen Courtney draw her gun, and when the ringing in my ears stopped, she was pointing it at Lucio and I, and Andre was lying on the floor in a rapidly growing pool of his own blood. Hands in the air! Reynolds snapped. Any funny business and you'll end up like him. What? What? I stuttered, in shock. With Courtney keeping a gun trained on us, Alfie quickly approached us and said, All right, this'll be just a moment. She pulled a cloth and what looked like a small eyedropper out of her pocket and, after dripping some of the unknown liquid onto it, held it up. Before she held it to my mouth, she paused. I'm sorry, I guess. I wish it could have happened another way. It was strange. It almost seemed as if Courtney had been the one who'd had a relationship end badly with Lucio, the way the two of them acted towards us. I couldn't think of anything to say. I was too stunned, and she placed the cloth over my mouth, and everything faded to black. The next thing I remember, I woke up in the wilderness with Lucio. We woke up around the same time, and we realised that the Sea and Pool was lost. We'd failed our brothers and sisters. We had allowed the outsiders in, and they had betrayed us. Without a purpose, we had resigned ourselves to banishment, and we have begun to set up a camp to survive. But if you find this, do not come looking for us. The intention of this message is not a plea for rescue, it is a plea to investigate and to prepare, for something surely is coming, and the Supernatural Protection Agency may not be ready for what it is. Don't forget, if you enjoyed that story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they really would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Oh, and don't forget to share the video far and wide. This will all help with YouTube's algorithm and will help to promote this channel more. And don't forget to check out the merch store. The link will be in the description and also in the video thumbnail. And if you would like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself with your purchase and I'll feature it in one of the videos. I now have my very own subreddit community where you can submit any stories you've written. You can submit your stories or encounters either there or send them to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. All the links are below. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit, and you'll also find me on Discord. If you would like to support this channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. Again, that will also be below. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.